Let me present you our guests today. Our guest speakers today are Mark and Christine Daniel. They have been married for 37 years. Mark was a major in the British Army before joining IBM and going into sales management. Christine was an international banker. They now give leadership to family life in United Kingdom and leader strategists in Crew Europe. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mark, my second question to you, Mark and Christine, will be to tell us a little bit more about yourself. This will be the second one. And this is where I'll ask you to share us a little bit more about yourself. What do you like, or what makes you special, maybe about your family, or information we can't find on internet. But my first question is the following. I was reading it and looking at your career, and it looks like you had some major turns in like being in Army, then in business. And my question is, what influenced your choice in the Army first, then change it to a successful Army career, and then to a business one? Such a different fields of operation. How old, by the way, you were when it happened, changing from Army to business? It will help me understand why people change so radically along their careers.
Okay, well, I went straight from school to the officer training school because I thought the Army would be a good idea. I had no idea what I wanted to do in life, none at all. And so I graduated from officer training school and joined the Royal Engineers, and I loved the time in the Army. Christy and I got married at university shortly after meeting in university, and it became clear towards the end of my 20s that actually the Army career is not really well suited to families, and it's not suited to having a wife who's got a really big career of her own. So I had a long think about this and thought, if I'm going to leave and try something else, now's the time to leave. So 1 minute I was a career soldier, and then I decided, well, I'm going to put Christine's career and family first. So I decided to leave and got a job with IBM, which I chose IBM because they're in high tech, it's a job of the future, but also because they give a fantastic training, and I needed to retrain. So that's how I pivoted to IBM. I pivoted later on into what we're probably going to talk a bit more about today. That is because I guess in my 30s, there was a sort of a growing feeling in my late 30s that I wanted to do something of value. And I enjoyed business, and business is of value, but it wasn't really scratching my itch. I wanted to make a difference. And so that appetite, that desire grew and grew and grew. And then as we'll talk about later, God stepped in, and we ended up doing something totally different from business.
Okay. I was just curious. To my second question, well, tell us a little bit more about yourself. What do you think we need to know about? What do you like? What makes you special, maybe about your family information, something that we cannot find on web?
Okay. Well, Christine's German. We met at university. And we've got 2 daughters and a grandson, and we both love walking and being out in the open. What else could we add?
Yeah, we really. Do you want to show the photos?
Yeah, we could show a photo. Yes, show the photo of the children. Hang on, I'm going to turn of our family, share screen. And we want that one. That's us. Can you see that, Andre? Say yes, because I can't see you anymore. I'm sure you can. So that's us as
actually we can't.
Oh, you can't. Oh, right.
There you go. I think something is coming. Yeah.
So that is us 37 years ago.
I'm the one on the left.
Okay, that helps.
That is us, wrinkle-free, and yeah, with Mark still in the Army. And yeah, it was a windy day, as you can see, but a very happy day in 1985. And the next one, this is our family. So this is a private family photo. In the middle, the bride is our youngest daughter, Lucy, who's a nurse, and she married Andrew, the groom, next to her this
Great
summer.
name.
Yeah. So, and next to Andrew is our other daughter, Charlie, and she's married to Dave, and they have little Freddie, who is nearly 2, as their son. Yeah. And this next slide is our latest member of the family, which is our newest baby, which has a tail and fur.
Oh boy.
So yeah, she's not even on the she's not even been shared via social media. So she is very sweet, except that she leaves puddles in the kitchen, if you understand.
Well, lots of
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing and giving us a little bit more of an insight. Well, you guys both had successful careers, Mark in the Army and then IBM, Christine senior executive in one of the UK banks. How did you manage being there, your work and life balance? Tell us a little bit more about it.
I have to say, I don't think we managed very well. I didn't, but I'm going to screen share again. There you go. So that you can still see the dog there, but this is how tricky I found
Oh boy.
balancing work and life. I've just never found it easy. So why I'm talking to you about it, I'm not sure really. But the reason I think one is my character, but also in the past I've enjoyed my work. And I think if you enjoy your work or you're working for a good cause, then it makes it really difficult. And when you get too tied up in your work, it just takes you away from all aspects of other sites. So it affects your health and all the rest of it. But in this conversation, I guess we're going to be focusing on our relationships, particularly our marriage and the way it's affected that. The other elements it affects, like fitness, your health, well-being, they can all get, and of course your children as well, can all get thumped if we don't manage that balance well. Let me take the screen sharing off again. There we go.
So a little bit of a story from just a few years ago, because managing the work-life balance, it's such an easy phrase to say, but it's really difficult, particularly if you're passionate about your work. And we both love our work, we love what we do, and we're passionate about helping people. And then a few years ago, our children had both just left home. They'd gone and come back and gone and come back, but they'd definitely gone. And without even realizing it, our diary became overloaded. And we were working during the week, but most weekends. And in fact, for about a month or 6 weeks, we just didn't stop. And we found ourselves driving home from the northeast of England back down to London, where we lived at the time. So that was about a 5-6 hour drive. And I remember turning to Mark and just saying, I'm not very, our whole life seems to be full of work. We seem to have lost us. We seem to have lost the fun factor. And actually, I'm not very happy in our marriage about this. And I think if we're going to carry on like this, if this is what our life is going to be now, then I think I'm going to step back from work, because I think our marriage is too important. And that would have been a great sacrifice if I'd done that. But as you can probably imagine, we had a very difficult conversation in the car that went for about 5 hours about how we had got to that point and what were the changes that we were going to make.
Yeah, so I was really upset too. And you need to understand as well that Christine and I were business partners in effect. We worked together in the same job, in the same organization. I had one role within the organization, Christine had another. But we were the sort of founder members of that group. So it was pivotal. I was really upset, and do you know what? I realized that we talked about this a number of times before and trying to manage work and do it and manage it well. But again, we'd fallen into this trap of just working too hard. I'm going to go back to screen sharing again, because I've drawn up a little chart which tries to show what had gone wrong or where it was all sitting. That's so this is a sort of my way of illustrating what I'm focusing on in life, and you can see that I'm putting so much focus, or I'd fall into the trap of putting so much focus on my work. Spiritual life wasn't too bad. I wasn't spending enough time in hobbies and interests. My diet was okay. My physical fitness and mobility, not too bad. Parenting wasn't too bad. The children had left home, but I was still meeting up with my two daughters and spending time with them. So that wasn't too bad. But my goodness, the amount of time I was giving to Christine and our marriage was appalling. So I then sort of looked at this and thought, well, where do I need to be? And the green line there represents the changes that needed to be made. I didn't need to put so much focus on work. We could easily get the job done with me spending less focus on it. I need to spend a lot more time on my marriage, a bit more work on fitness, diet, and a bit more spiritual work on my spiritual side. And I can talk about what that looked like, each of those categories, later in the questions. But I just want to try to illustrate in a graphic form, which and I find this sort of picture quite helpful at times, what it looked like. Don't know what it looks like for you. I don't know if you've been in this place, but this is the mess that we'd got into, which I needed to recover from.
Well, speaking of us knowing it or not, let's see if our guests are familiar today with this. We would like to have a poll right now, and let me ask you this in the poll: how are you, those that are participating in this webinar, are managing your work and life balance? You can choose only once. Brilliant, I'm in control. Good, I'm learning how to do it. Poor, I find it very challenging. Or bad, I'm rarely in control of my work and life balance. You can answer it. Probably will see the results. Give it another second. We'll see what are the results.
We didn't get even the time to read the questions, so it's already saying.
It's okay. They're there. How are you managing the balance between life and work, outside of work? Brilliant, I'm in control. Good, I'm learning. Poor, I find it very challenging. Or bad, I'm rarely in control.
Actually, I think what the previous speaker was saying is that we didn't really get a chance to vote. It just disappeared from the screen.
Okay.
So I myself included.
Try to find it because it's there. I mean, I see it. It's probably maybe folded somehow to your computer.
The poll or
But I see that people are voting and voted. So maybe. Okay. Okay, so most people, from what I see, like 80% said good, I'm learning how to do it. Some people said poor. Nobody pretty much said bad or brilliant. So we're kind of good and poor.
Great. So one of the things, hopefully, what we're about to share will be to helpful wherever you are. Just you'll be helped in managing this whole aspect of life in a better way. And so going back to that picture of the elephant on a tightrope, how do you stay in that position of balance on the tightrope? And at the end of the day, if we don't manage and set our priorities, then things will go wrong. And so how do we go about doing that? And I'm going to come on to that. There are lots of things that distract us from our relationships. Yet relationships are really important, aren't they? They're like living things. It's a bit like a garden, and they need feeding and they need protecting, and we need to manage those distractions, particularly at work, well, if our relationships are going to thrive. And for us to have thriving relationships, we've found, or it's particularly in my case, I have to be really intentional. So if you're married, or if you're dating, or have a relationship that's important to you, then you have to be intentional to look after it. One of the things that I've found helpful in doing this is creating a personal purpose statement. Now, I know when you're in the Leader Impact Foundations group, you get to write one of these purpose statements, and it's a really good exercise. So I've refreshed mine recently, and here it is. Oh, that has not worked. So why is that? No, try that. So this is my current purpose statement. I'd like to be known for being a godly, kind, intentional, and effective man, reflecting God's image in the way I live and work and play, and helping others do the same. Investing my relationship with Christine and creating an environment in which she can flourish is important to me. I want to grow continually and to provide a secure, peaceful, and loving home for my family and friends. In this season, I'd like to stay fit and strong and explore things creative. I want to add value and contribute to increasingly seeing godly leaders and influences changing the world. Now, this purpose statement gives me like a framework, and I have to keep prompting myself to keep looking at this, like every week, to look at this and just remember that as I go into my week, everything that I do in that week should fit in the framework defined by this statement. And if it doesn't, then I need to ask myself, why am I doing this? Back to Christine.
So it's certainly, I think a purpose statement or a value statement like this is really important. I mean, these are the kind of things that we do in business, aren't they? But actually thinking about our values and our priorities in our whole life is such a good thing to do. And I really like your little visual diagram that helps you stay accountable. And when I see Mark being intentional about our marriage, about our family life, that makes me feel loved. And I know his work is important to him. I know he loves to do it. But when I see him taking active steps that demonstrate to me that our marriage and our family life is a priority to him, to us, that's really important to me. And we're all managing pressures all the time. All the time we make choices about where we put our time and our energy as we manage different seasons of our lives. It could be the pressures of a very young family, or perhaps teenagers, maybe elderly parents we need to live with, or perhaps there are illnesses or financial pressures. I mean, there can be so many different things that we need to manage and prioritize. And we found that if we keep our spiritual lives and our marriage healthy and happy, then everything else can be managed well. And I think that that's probably our top tip, is just maintaining that sense of priority about where we spend our time, because everything else we will manage well, and we will play more as a team if our marriage team is good. And we thought we'd just pass on some very practical tips on how we have learned to do that, and still need to continually do this. So one of the things that we do, I think this is, apart from choosing to make our marriage a priority, the next thing we do very practically is manage our diary carefully. And we sit down at regular times in the year and literally just open the planner, and we say, right, which is time for us? Where are holidays? Where are the times where we're just going to go and have some fun? Where are the priorities? And then work has to fit around that for Mark, because the work will just, we learned that the work will just fill everything if we don't do that. So our diary management is key. And then we also like to not just put the big blocks in, like our holidays, but also the next blocks into our diary, and that is just regular time for us. Now, when the kids were younger and we were managing jobs and young children, we could only find short times for each other, and we did date nights, and many couples do date nights. It's very well known, and but the point is they were in our diary. And I found also it was I felt particularly loved if Mark managed the babysitter, organised the babysitter and took her home at the end of the evening. But these days, although we do go out on dates in the evening, dinner or the theatre or something like that occasionally, actually the thing that we have learned, and this will be different for all of us, but whatever it is for you, is for us, we like to go away for a day rather than an evening. So we will do once a month or so, we will have a day in the diary that is just for us. And we like to go walking in the hills. We enjoy it if we can have a pub lunch or a picnic somewhere. And cake is always popular too. One other thing that we have always done when the kids were small, even from when they were babies, is we would have once a year a weekend away, or sometimes it was just one night and 2 days. And I think there were people who said to us, isn't that a little irresponsible to leave your babies or your young children for a whole weekend? But we said, no, they're either with their grandparents, or we did swaps with another family, and they had our children and then we had theirs, and we would have a whole herd of children for a weekend. But they were happy. And we have found that if we invested a weekend just being a married couple once a year, that was really good for our marriage. So and the research bears that out. So I would really urge you to consider just spending once a year a little longer time together. And then just lastly, two things lastly. One is we've had to, particularly me, I've had to learn to say no to things. And that I find quite challenging. I like to say yes to things. But the diary management means saying no, and sometimes saying no to good things, which is even harder. But lastly, we have found that at times when we make that time for us, what happens is we end up talking about important things that are not about our marriage or our relationship or us or how we're doing, we'll talk about the mortgage and the bills. And so we picked up a tip from some friends, which is admin nights. Here we go. Here is us. Oh, we have given you this picture so that you will remember the admin night. But basically, we put time in the diary just a few times a year where we talk about the planning of the finances and the bills and schooling and all those sort of important things, so that when we do have our time for our marriage, it's not invaded by domestic administration. So there we go. Just some practical tips from us.
Yeah, so those are some practical ones, Andre, but there's a more conceptual thing that I'd like to discuss for a moment. And we all make mistakes, don't we, in life? Sometimes we mess up big time. We certainly have in our marriage. And when that happens, I find that's where my faith has been really important to me. And it's important for two reasons. Firstly, when we mess up, it helps to remember that God has forgiven us for messing up already through what Jesus has done for us on the cross. And he's also given us the power to forgive others. So that I found really helpful. And secondly, I've learned that my identity is not based in my work. My identity is actually based in what Jesus has done for me. And so I don't have to prove anything to God or anybody or earn anything through work, because it's all been done. So in other words, my faith really quite deeply underpins who I am. So now you've got sort of some really practical stuff, but also some more conceptual faith-based tips. Back to you, Andre.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering to ask you, army business, then you moved to crew, and I would assume there was a very big drop on your salary. So what was behind it? What changed? Why did you change a successful business career, joining crew and doing what you're doing? What's behind it?
It was a 75% salary drop. So you're right.
Okay, 4 times. Okay.
Yeah, which is
Why?
why? Well, in short, we'll tell you a story of how it happened. But basically, faith became important to me. I'd never been interested in religion, and nor would Christine. But that changed, and suddenly faith became important to us. And Christine's will share the story.
So yes, my background actually is in science, in biochemistry, before banking. But I do remember looking into the eyes of our newborn baby and just realizing that life was more than a collection of chemicals. And we went to see our local pastor, our local vicar, about having our daughter christened, because that was a family tradition. It was more about naming the baby and than anything. But to our surprise, the vicar asked us why we wanted to have our daughter christened, and then looked at the promises that we were being asked to make. And we said, oh, well, we can't say that we turned to Jesus because we don't believe that. So he gently challenged us to consider what it was that we did believe. Now, if I didn't tell the vicar this at the time, but I really felt that religion was about keeping rules, and that was going to be the end of any fun as far as I could see. And it was about trying very hard to be a good person. And I thought, well, that's going to be hard. And it was for weak people. And I was very proud, and I didn't think that I was one of those. But I was curious. I think when I was asked a direct question about what I believed, maybe it's my science background, but I wanted some answers. So I started to read the Bible for myself, and I discovered in the person of Jesus was a man that I would expect God to be like Jesus. And I was completely amazed and by this person. And one day, just a few months later, I decided to say a prayer. Now, I was lying in bed. I was on my own because Mark was away. I was on my own, and I had the blanket over my head. And I just prayed, and I said, Jesus, if you are real, please come into my life. And I had a sense of peace and joy, and I felt incredibly loved. And the reason I'm telling you this is it was an encounter. I can't describe it in any other way than an encounter with the living God, the God who made us and gave us life. And I had changed from the inside out. It wasn't like I was following a set of rules or religion, but it was a marvelous encounter that changed me immediately.
And Christine did change, and so I then decided, because I could see the impact it had on Christine, so I decided that I'd explore it too. And after some research, answering questions like, can you trust the Bible? What about suffering? How does a God allow suffering? Does Jesus exist? Questions like that. I came to the conclusion that having a Christian faith made more sense than not having a faith. So I made the same decision as Christine about 6 months behind after her. And then the guy who I'd been discussing all this with decided to start a small group looking at what the Bible said about marriage and relationships. And we joined this group. And after about 9 months in this group, we looked at each other across the kitchen table, and we said, what's happened to our relationship? Like, our just marriage had been transformed. It was struggling, frankly, beforehand. And now we were communicating much better. We were being much nicer to each other. Our sex life was brilliant. And so and we were resolving disagreements, and I was much less angry than I had been in the past. So something was going on, and we came to the conclusion that this is what happens when you put God's word into practice in the power of the Holy Spirit. Transformation changes, and it changes now, today, and not in the next world, but right now. So as a result of this experience, we thought we've got to tell other people. So we started running these groups for months and months and months. I don't know how many groups we ran. And then somebody saw what was going on and challenged us to leave the corporate world and to join Cru, or Agape, as it's called in the UK, to lead family life. And we did that. And so come 2003, we joined staff, took the salary drop. God provided for us in amazing ways. And then we've just handed over leadership of family life. So we led family life in the UK for 18 years.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that's the answer to your question. It was a God transformation that did it.
Yes, thank you for answering the question and going a little bit deeper, sharing about your personal story. It was really inspiring. For those of you guys who are interested in this, I told you in Leader Impact, we're focusing on helping growing leaders professionally, personally, and spiritually. For those of you that are interested in this spiritual dimension, there's a useful piece. We'll have this link later, written by Christine, about their story. They just shared it a little bit from what I heard, and having this relationship with God. You will have this link at the end with the transcript pretty much of what we have talked about. What was their speech about, some links, useful links, and some spiritual part, if you guys are interested. And my last question for you for today, and then we'll open it for others. Let's make it very personal to you. What you, both of you, will be doing within the next 6 months to manage your work-life balance, because being crew. I know it. It's a lot of time invested as well. What do you practically plan on doing within the next 6 months to continue managing this work and family life balance?
Oh, good question, Andre. We're in a particularly busy phase at the moment. And so we've been having this conversation ourselves. And so we're just about to do a diary session where we're going to block out and manage the diary in the way that we explained earlier. We've got some things we're going to have to say no to because life is getting too busy. We've already got a holiday booked in front of us. Funny enough, as I prepared for this session that we're having now, I redrafted my purpose statements. That was very helpful. And on a more personal note, there's some stuff that's happened in my past which has affected the way I think about myself and the way I behave at times, and that has reared its head recently. And so I've decided to go and get some counselling to help me understand the past and to bring about healing from the past. And funny enough, I had my first meeting with a counsellor today. So that's kind of stuff that I'm working on. And Christine.
Yes, I just want to affirm Mark. I think it's very brave to seek help, therapeutic help when we need it. I mean, I think we all have times where we want somebody alongside that can walk through difficult times with us, and I'm really glad that you're doing that. This for us, it's not rocket science. We have to continually manage our diaries, and one of the fun things that we try and do is take it in turns as to say who's going to manage the next day out and where are we going to do, so that we do make sure that we actually have time to do some fun things for ourselves. And for me personally, I'm just exploring some art projects and some painting, which is a passion that I dropped when I was at school. So now, aged 60, I am going to pursue something that I dreamed of doing when I was a teenager. So
I was planning to do sky jumping, but probably not going to do it at this age anymore. Me, just affirming, I like that very much. Me and my wife, our wedding was on the 3rd of April, and every 3rd of the month we're going out, just celebrating every month, 3rd of each month, celebrating that. So I like this story, very similar. In a minute, y'all, as they say in Texas, I said, meaning the audience, will have a possibility to ask a question. Would you please put it down in a chat box, and I will choose some of those and read those to our guests. But meanwhile, I'm gonna just summarize it. What I like the most, what was kind of the stand out for me. I like the diagram, the life wheel. It's not that I didn't know about it, but it's always fun to get back with the diagram and see where they are, kind of scale yourself or note yourself, mark yourself where you are and see where you would want to be and kind of work on that. Mission statement, I have it, but it's always fun to look at that and see, okay, are you doing what's your mission, or you're kind of out of the way? I like that as well. Weekend away, did it, totally loved it. So thanks for sharing that. Appreciate that. These were my outcomes from the webinar. Let's go into the chat box. Okay, the first one. How do you handle work colleagues, bosses, employees who don't understand your boundaries? How do you handle those?
Good question.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Yeah, go ahead. You can answer that, and then we'll take another one.
I think at the end of the day, I would remind, if this was me personally, I tend to work too hard anyway. It's not a problem that I don't work hard enough. The opposite is true. So I just remind my boss that actually I'm very committed, and actually, I am by and large a high deliverer compared to other people. So if I were to ask for a bit of slack or make space for personal life, that would not be an unreasonable thing for me to do. But that was me. That's how I would answer it personally. I would encourage my boss to consider that there is more to life than work. You'd have to be very careful how you do this. And that I want to work in a team where we look at life holistically and we're all thriving, which means every now and then we're going to have to cut each other slack when other priorities emerge, and we have to cut back a bit on work. But if the whole team is working like that, it tends to be much more likely to be a high-performing team or a high-performance team, in my experience. I don't know if you've heard that story. I don't know if it's true, but it's a good story. When the settlers landed on the east coast of the US, there were two groups of settlers that went off, and they were in a hurry to get across America to establish their settlements. And one of them just rode day in, day out every day. And another one, the other group, decided they weren't going to do that, but they were going to take regular rest every week. So they took a day off every week. And the group that got to their destination first were the group that took a day off every week. And it was because they managed to maintain their equipment, their relationships, their people, and that paid off in the long term. So it's a helpful story for me to remember when I'm working. We need rest.
Thank you. Great question from Anita from Croatia. I'm a young entrepreneur with a lot of ideas and a lot of proposals for cooperation, and it's very difficult to decide whom to say yes and whom to say no. So the question is, what advice would you give if you had to choose between several wonderful projects, if you don't have the capacity for all of them?
Pray. Each project, I'm quite a logical person. But I also have a good gut instinct for things. So if it was me, I would logically look at each of the projects and the pros and the cons for doing them, now or later. Is it a yes? Is it a no? Or is it a later? Is it a question of timing? And I would categorize them like that. And sometimes there isn't a logical yes or no or later answer. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut instinct. But you're wise already because you realize you haven't got capacity for all the projects at the same time. So already you're on the way to making a good decision. And I personally also believe in the power of prayer, because if you ask God to show you the priorities for the projects, I do believe that God will show you.
Who asked the question, Andre? What was her name?
Anita.
Anita. From Croatia. Hi, Anita. When we started Family Life back in 2003, we had exactly this problem. That there were lots of things we could have done, and I'm an ideas person, so I wanted to try them all and even add to the list. But the team around me, of which one was Christine, would say, no, you can't do everything. We've got to decide which one. And so we would draw up a set of criteria which we would judge each project on, and then have a number of questions which we then review as a team. And the criteria would be things like, what's the strategic plan? What's the vision that we're all pursuing? Can we look at each project? How do they fit with this strategic plan? Another one was we had a value which said whatever we're going to do, we want to be able to do really well, not poorly, not medium, not mediocre. It had to be able to do really well. So if we didn't have the skills in the team or amongst the volunteers that surrounded the team to do the job, we just wouldn't go near it. So we just drew up this set of criteria, and we'd always use that set of criteria for reviewing what we did. I also had a couple of older, wiser people who had been in business and had been through this sort of how do you focus, how do you decide type decisions many times themselves. And I used to meet up with them and have little reviews with them, and I found that really helpful.
It's just like with steaks, right? Not medium well, but well done, right?
It's got to be well done.
Should be well done.
The other one I put down, actually, but there we go.
Steaks, that's what I'll remember out of that answer. Another one from Tasha. How do you empower, that's a good one. How do you empower those under your leadership to have this good work-life balance?
That's a really good question. The way it's worked for me in our team in Family Life is that I would take downtime. I go off and have my spiritual health was and is important to me. So I would take time off to go and have a retreat or spend a day walking and praying alone. So I would do that as a leader, as a team leader. And I would say to the others, look, you need me to be spiritually at peace and connected with God. It's an essential part of leadership. So you need it from me. So I'm going to take this time out. And by the way, I expect it from you too. So I would model it myself and then encourage the team members to each do it. Ironically, it's often the leader who's more focused on this balance than some of the team members, is what I've found.
I think the modeling it is really important for the leader. You know, and one of our things that we felt was really important, and I know that it's important for your leadership group, is also our emotional health. You know, it's not just our business capabilities, but our overall general well-being. And that's why we think it's very important to model asking for help, you know, like going and having some therapy if we need help. And it's helped everyone in our team. We found that people wanted to join our teams because they felt they could be safe, they felt safe, they could be real, but we were also very successful. You know, we did work very hard, and we've always achieved a lot of things, but we've had strong relationships in our team where people were free to be themselves. And we started that by we model that, you know, as leaders.
It makes us sound wonderful, Andre.
We're not perfect.
The question from Ukraine. Long phrase, I'll read it. Bear with me. I'm from Ukraine, Kate says. Today I work in a charitable foundation. There's a lot of work and it's difficult for me to balance my personal life and work. I understand that the job is temporary and the war will end and I will return to a balanced job. But now it's hard. In principle, it's difficult to plan your time because usually a lot of things happen spontaneously. I confirm that. Could you suggest anything?
Oh, bless you. So I remember when I was serving in Northern Ireland, which at that time was a hostile environment, not as hostile as the war in Ukraine, but it was hostile. So you're in a totally different place, unusual for not your normal work environment at all. But within that environment, we would have to find ways of finding some sort of balance. And Christine wasn't there. I mean, our wives weren't with us because we were walking around being shot at. But still within that environment, there were things that there were routines that we all tried to get into where we dressed well. Our physical fitness was important because especially when you're very tense a lot of the time and adrenaline is running, you need an outlet. So even within the environment that you're in, I would suggest get together with a friend and start discussing how you can take care of your well-being in the context that you're in, and then pray for each other, and then support each other and say, hey, are you doing that? Did you manage to get some exercise? Did you manage to close your eyes for a couple of minutes and just relax? Did you manage to go through that breathing exercise where you're just breathing and listening to yourself breathing for 5 minutes? Whatever it is that is right for you in that context, find a friend and support one another in your doing it. And then when you come back to the normal world, which hopefully in Ukraine will be sooner rather than later, then the problems will be different, because it's re-entry into the normal world, leaving that whole toxic, nasty space behind, but re-entering into the normal world. And how you do that, that is another webinar in itself.
Can I just add to that, when life is so unpredictable and under extreme pressure, and sometimes we have seasons where we just need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, but those are also times where perhaps we we are human and we need space, and maybe you mentioned just taking time to breathe and be I think being still and being quiet, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes every day. If you're somebody who prays, then maybe even not use words to pray, but just to be still and to be quiet. If it can be outside for me, I like to be still and be quiet outside. But even if that's not possible, to sit in a corner and close your eyes and just to be still. There's a wonderful Psalm 46, where there's a phrase there, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted over the nations. And that I find very helpful, to hold that promise and prayer in the stillness of with God. And just let everything rest for those short moments.
Thank you very much. Last one will be from me. If it already happened and a person was not balancing his life and work, he's in a burnout already. What are 3 recommendations from the top of your mind?
The first one is to go to a doctor, no question. Go to a doctor, because there's all sorts of things that can be done to help. And also, once a doctor's note has been produced, then you can give the person time off. So there is no question that go to a doctor. Secondly, treat it like a wound. Someone's wounded in combat, they need care, and then needs to be taken out of the battle. So I would do that. I'd treat it like a wound and take them out of the battle. But they may not want to be taken out of the battle, and that's when things get slightly more tricky. When somebody gets into that place of burnout, it affects the rest of the team as well, because the team knows that something's wrong. So it's really important that we as leaders manage it well.
Thank you very much.
I would
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to add the third thing is find a friend that can just be a friend, not someone that is wanting to fix you, but just somebody that will be alongside, to encourage you, perhaps pray for you, just provide for your physical needs, and just be a friend. Yeah.
Thank you very much.